start with a very serious question first.
Yeah.
Please tell us, what was your absolute favorite school lunch as a kid? And any favorite memories of eating at school?
Well, my Aunt Edie, who I lived with a portion of the time, was a school nutritional professional. And I cringe to say this, but we called her the lunch lady, and she was happy to be called the lunch lady. And Aunt Edie was the place where I went to sneak to eat a lot. She was the only Italian in the family. I grew up in an Irish Catholic family, and Edie Mangello was her maiden name. And she was a remarkable woman and made the best lasagna you could imagine. And she was a lunch lady at Charlestown High School, and a remarkable woman. So for me, as a kid, my grandmother worked at Hood's Milk, thank God. My Uncle George worked at Hood's Milk, thank God. So whatever Hood's Milk products you had was what we had in the fridge. And I always talked about it, and I had no idea how it was going to happen, because at that time, I don't know that anyone ever forecasted, any kind of a successful career for me beyond my grandmother, who I could have the smoking gun in my hand and she'd say I was innocent. She was just a remarkable woman. It's a reoccurring theme in my life. I had great women in my life. I was very fortunate. I would have to say milk was a constant. Loved it, still do, and peanut butter was big. Of course, it was on that Wonder white bread, which is just about the worst breads you could possibly eat. But meals were, it was day to day. People want to know if you had a long-term plan. When you were a kid in my neighborhood, you didn't have a long-term plan. You were living day to day.
So raising kids to be active, healthy, and hard workers is such a challenge. What values did you really try to instill in your sons?
It's interesting. I've always preached family, and listen, I've touched on my father, mother, uncles, aunts, cousins, everyone who is a part of, it takes a village, and I'm a great example of that. The Boys and Girls Club was impactful in my life. I think with each subsequent generation, and I think with age you get perspective. At 35, I just didn't understand my dad. My dad was raised in an orphanage, had no frame of reference of family from birth to 18, was given the choice at 18, do you stay in the orphanage till you're 21, or do you get out and go in the Army? And he went in the Army. How he got in the Alaskan Ski Patrol, I'll never know. He was 6'7", 250. So I have no idea. They stuck him on a pair of head 220s. He'd never skied in his life. But he had no frame of reference, and at 55, my perspective on that is so much different. But I think each subsequent generation wants to be a little bit better at being a dad, being a son, being a brother, being a husband. And that's what I try to do. I take an accounting on a daily basis. There's no super formula, but one thing I do tell my kids, I wouldn't be surprised if my kids were in trouble. I'd be surprised if my kids were disrespectful. I'd be surprised if my kids weren't kind to someone less fortunate, physically, financially, all of the above. How you treat the bellman, to me, says a lot about who you are. I treat the bellman the same way I treat the President of the United States, with respect.
Here's a question from our audience. Who inspires you?
My wife. And once again, you're clapping, gals. I appreciate that, and I get that, but it's a long haul. Guys get everything 10 years later. Trust me, we're slow. And once I talked about perspective, she's, my wife and I went to Villanova together. She was a classics major, I wasn't. Shock. She comes in really handy in Rome because all the buildings are in Latin and she can read them. That's great. It's a dead language, though. For me, it's not real functional. She's a remarkable mom, incredible person, and somebody who challenges me to be a better person. I think that's what relationships are all about. Relationships are all about you know, trying to inspire one another to be better. And I would have to say, our older boy, Chris, is in a unique place in his life. I don't know if anyone are St. Louis Rams fans or follow the NFL. He just on his own went homeless for 2 days in St. Louis. Just to draw attention to a topic that is so much more prevalent than we want to realize. And, you know, by his own admittance, he was the person you drive down the road and there's a guy in a tent, you just look away. That meant a lot to me. He went and climbed Kilimanjaro. Chris is a go-getter. He had a bucket list at 14. He's just a different kind of guy. He climbed Kilimanjaro a couple of years ago, was shocked by the abject poverty and lack of clean water in Tanzania. 60% of the deaths are caused by dirty water. He goes back now and he's building wells. He just got back from Africa. He's building solar wells in Tanzania. He inspires me. And, you know, at some point, and it's nice for me, you spend your whole life through their childhood teaching, and now my 30-year-old is kind of teaching me, which is pretty cool.
That's great.